The thing is, a lot of times, like people, when you think about Shavuot, the 6 of Sivan, they say, that's the connection, Matan Torah, right? But the reality is, it's like it's this entire month, right? This entire month is about like revelation and that unfolding process. I mean, obviously, we get the major halak, the major portion on Shavuot in terms of that connection to Pesach and how Pesach connected us to Purim. So we got that connection, right? And so, but it's deepening that understanding, right? And so, like, where are we at then? How do we deepen that understanding of who we are? Because the thing is, what is Hashem's ultimate wish for all of us, for all of Hashem's creation? Like, what does Hashem want to see? What is the purpose of this thing, right? Like, if what we like, I believe our tradition. I've looked at other traditions. I haven't even seen them address these issues, right? Maybe they do. Maybe they have certain texts I haven't been privy to, but I just have never seen it, right? But the thing is, it's like the purpose for us is to connect that, to be totally reconnected to Hashem while we're in this world, right? For us to use our free will to connect every single part of our body, every single part of our thinking process, right? In our emotional state, right? We want to connect all of these mechanisms to Hashem, right? And that's why we have the mitzvot, and that's why we learn hashkafa, and that's why we, learn musar and all these types of things, right? So with that being said, I have two short videos. Got to bring the videos sometimes because we gotta. It's not just intellectual. It's not just. It has to be in your heart. It's like I'm learning. I think with everybody. I mean, I'm learning Woti now. Like he's a catalyst. Like we're getting closer and closer to a siyum on Mishalat Yesharim, which is a big deal because the first siyum of the yeshiva was with introduction to Kabbalah with Rav Ashlag, right? And that was like, I think it was like 71 chapters or something like this. So that was a thing, right? And so now Ramchal is in a different avoda, which would be the second siyum of the yeshiva, and that's it's very deep, but it's written in a way where it's very connected. But if you connect it to Rabbi Chaim Vital's Shari Kedusha, you'll see that like what Rav Chal is saying is much deeper than what it appears if you just read it straight, right? So, with all that being said, it's like part of that unraveling of what we want to get to through the rest of this month is in this lifetime, if I could, if I gave everyone, say, hey, I have this, green pill. If you take it, it has these like mixtures in it, some mystical stuff, and inside of it, if you take this pill, however you imagine yourself, you become, right? However you imagine yourself, you become. And so the thing is, it's like, part of the fighting of the social conditioning is being able to look at myself and say, hey, you know what? So much of my life has been dictated by this subjective system, right? From the moment I'm born, I'm subjected into these categories, into these boxes based off of various conditions, location, ethnicity, all these things, right? And so this shaped us. This subjective social structure that we live in, it shaped us, and not only us, everyone we know. So if for a second we look at ourselves as human beings and say, hey, you know what? I have the ability to not think in that way. I could live around a lot of people who think away. Like that's the beauty of being a Jew, right? I'm a Jew, and you know what? Billions upon billions of people in the world are not. So that means billions upon billions of people in the world have no connection to Shabbat, have no connection to kosher, have no connection to Rosh Chodesh, have no connection to a base din, have no connection to none of these things. Maybe they heard of it, maybe they know about it. I'm sure they know about it because of Israel and all the chaos here. So, but in general, most people in the world have never even met a Jew, right? So in that way, I'm living completely in a different way than everyone else. Okay, so if I accept that premise that I live in a different way than everyone else, then that means that the construct of the world that I live differently from doesn't necessarily hold weight to me identifying myself. Right? Because I'm already over here. I'm a Jew. I have a certain system of time, I have a certain system of diet, I have a certain system of worship, I have a certain system of marriage, of community. I have a certain system. You don't agree, you're not a part of it. I get it. So that means that the system that you have does not apply to me. Now, the issue is that I still have to function in a society, right? And that's where it gets tricky. So the thing is, but the main point even on this is not even that. The main point is saying that am I capable as a human being right now to say that the social constructs that have been given to me, I'm going to say for like 10 minutes, I'm going to say for a few minutes, none of those things exist by me, right? So I don't need to become the richest black man of all time, right? I don't need to, be the most respected this. I don't need all those things are constructs, right? So if I could achieve anything, if I could contribute anything to humanity, what would it be? If I had that, if I had the, if Hashem says, use your imagination and whatever you can create, I will take that and then even double it or triple it. But you got to start with your premise. And so this is what the rest of this month is about. It's about that continuous work of saying, like, who am I really? Am I the social construct? Which is good. It has a date. It's like they tell us, you're supposed to respect history, right? That's what they say. I mean, I went to the same schools, you went to the same schools. It says, you got a whole class period, history. If you don't know history, you're going to repeat the same mistakes, right? That's what they say. You got to know history. You got to know American history. You got to know African American history. You got to know American Indian history. You got to know European history. You have to know the history of the world, man, if you want to be enlightened, right? That's what they say. But I mean, but my question is like this: who's writing that history? What was their objectives? What was their agenda? Was I a part of that? Was the enriching of myself and my history, my ancestry? Was I a part of that? My exploration as a person, is that a part of the history that you wrote? And if it wasn't a part of it, why do I have to learn it? Why am I subjugated to your wisdom? Why do I need you? Why do I have to learn it? Oh, because you need to fit into our social structure. Because if you fit into our social structure, then you could earn a living. So by accepting this narrative, you now have access to sustainability. And it's not just in history. It's the sciences, it's physical health, it's mental, the whole thing. And so to me, it's not about saying, well, I don't have to learn it. No, I can learn how they think. I don't have to learn history. I can learn how they want me to perceive history. That's what a kid needs to understand. You're not learning history. You're learning how someone else wants you to see it, but you should still, for that reason, even more so, you have to learn it because you have to see the construct of what's being created around you. So yeah, okay, I get it. You went to college, you read some books, but what was their agenda with that book? That's not from a prophet. Oh, well, he was a scholar and he went to Cambridge. And there's nothing holy about Cambridge. There's nothing holy about Yale. Oh, because we made money on some plantations and we killed some American Indians and we stole some money from King George and jumped on a boat and came over here to the Americas. Oh, so because of that we're noblemen. Come on, man. Like I mean, Don't subject my intelligence to that. Please, I'm free. So from that standpoint, I got to critique again, who am I? Because people get offended. They say, oh, well, how are you going to diss Black history? But you know what? My ancestors didn't write Black history. Big Mama didn't write Black history. Big Daddy didn't write Black history. And then that one Black dude that they put in the university, I don't know who he is. What was his agenda? I don't know. I don't know. I just know he has a degree, and so therefore I need to listen to him. Why are we so obsessed with degrees? Well, because it's a white person's institution. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. I went over to this system, right? Because people much rather go to mainstream institutions than HBCUs, right? Now, I'm not taking away from the culture of HBCUs, but I'm saying by and largely, people want to be accepted in mainstream society. So they go to the university, and so the university says you're educated in this. It gives you a document. You're able to use that document in society, but it means much more than that. It's my social standing. It's who I am. It's how I identify myself. So from that perspective, it's like, okay, so now someone else created a mechanism that now I'm utilizing to express who I am in the world. Someone else created it. Anyways, so yeah, so I want to say a couple of videos, and two videos are short ones, but it's about invention, right? And about inventions that happen. But the key thing is if you have the ability to create anything in the world, if you anything, like what would it be? How would you remove pain and suffering from the world? If you said you had access to any amount of money, any amount of resources, anything you could imagine, you need it, you got access to it. What would you do? All right. So and this thought is something that is not part of the thought process of the society that we live in, right? Because the society that we live in tells us that the society that the society that we live in tells us that we are a social security number, we are ethnicity, we are an individual, this whole thing. And then, but the sages, specifically Rob Aushak he says the bigness of the world, of the galaxies, the stars, the planets, the whole thing, that's there to create a desire from us. That's for us to have a desire to go higher and higher, to seek more and more and more. So God created this expansive reality for that. But nevertheless, we're supposed to connect to it. Right? But on the flip side, the world that we live in says, no, you are small, you are insignificant. And this big world is proof of how insignificant you are. You see the difference? All right, so let's start imagining if I could remove pain and suffering from the world, if I had access to endless amount of resources, what would I do? So we're looking at human achievements, and we're utilizing this mechanism of seeing people that lived at specific times in history, and they thought differently. They did things differently, thus created a new way of thinking, right? Like what they said by Sarah. When Sarah had a child, it changed the entire world because everyone was like, whoa, this elderly woman had a child, and the word got around and people got inspired, and older people who thought they couldn't have children anymore conceived because it was a new idea in the world. So in the same way, we want to look at these innovations, right? And we're not saying these innovations per se remove pain and suffering from the world. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, who knows? But the main point is for us is to see a world in a collective consciousness that thought one way, and there was one consciousness that did it differently, and then the whole world after that did it the same way.
But you can't do that. That's impossible. Every now and then, it's important to look back into the past at the times when humans have accomplished seemingly impossible tasks. This is a great way to remind ourselves that with enough determination, we can achieve anything. Here is our top 10 list of what we believe to be the most inspirational human achievements of all time. Number 10, the 4-minute mile. It can be argued that no sporting achievement is more iconic than the first mile run completed in under 4 minutes by British athlete Roger Bannister. For decades, physicians claimed that the human body could not perform a mile run in under 4 minutes. And for decades, it seemed they were right. Nobody could do it. However, once Bannister had broken the psychological barrier and proved to the world that it was possible, many others soon followed. It was a powerful demonstration of the willpower of humankind, which we can always draw upon when we are facing an impossible task. Number 9. Climbing Mount Everest. On May 29, 1953, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay finally conquered the crown of the world, reaching the summit of Mount Everest, the highest point on Earth at 8,848 meters. Prior to their successful attempt, many other brave climbers had died trying to reach the top. And much like Bannister's 4-minute mile, everybody believed it was impossible until it was actually achieved. To this day, more than 4,000 people have successfully reached the top. Number 8. The Olympic Games. A huge step in uniting the world through a sense of international friendship and individual achievement occurs every 4 years at the Olympic Games. It seems that for these 2 weeks, every nation in the whole world stops what they're doing in order to watch and cheer on their athletic representatives. The most talented and hard-working athletes on the planet serve as a beacon of energy and inspiration for everybody who watches. And it just goes to show the powerful impact sports and physical activity have on personal and character development. Number 7. Traveling the ocean. Now, when you stop and take the time to think about it, sailing across the ocean was probably the bravest things humans could have ever accomplished. At a time of relatively primitive technology, there was no way of knowing what dangers could be waiting for them at any time. A combination of their bravery, along with the engineers who enabled these enormous ships to be produced, led to the globalization of the pre-industrial world. Number 6. Steam trains and railways. The hallmark of the Industrial Revolution, trains enabled people to get places unlike anything before. Journeys which had previously taken days or even months could now be done in just a few hours. Building railways forged nations and brought people closer together. They also enabled better living standards as a greater range of goods and food could be transported. And finally, people had the freedom to move to new places without it being such a burden. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more Top Truths content. In the meantime, feel free to take a look at our other.
Yeah, so I'm gonna play another video really very quickly, and then we'll go into some more ideas. We're going to do a little bit about this week's Torah portion. But anyway, so the point is just saying like that this idea, like you think about it, like there's so many things that exist right now in history that people cannot conceive of something past it or bigger than it or the probability that something could manifest, right? And that's because of a collective consciousness, a collective way of thinking. They asked a question about Moshe. They said, well, what was the significance of Moses growing up separate than the Israelites? Right? We may have talked about this before. But the idea that Moshe grew up separately, right? He was a kid, he's putting his teva, Batya, Bukasham brings him into the house. And he grows up in Pharaoh's house. Grows up totally different. Best education, best clothes, best healthcare, everything. He's like living in the royal palace. And they talk about the difference between him living in the royal palace all the time versus, amongst the Israelites. And they said if he would have grown up with the Israelites, he would have took on a lot of that slavery consciousness. And some of that slavery consciousness that he had would have made it very difficult for him to come and lead his people and be a leader, right? And so it's this idea that the collective consciousness is affects the collective, and it determines how they view what they can accomplish, what's the next level is, right? It affects that, right? So what we're saying over here, right? What we're saying over here is that there's a collective consciousness that exists today on so many things, whether it's world peace, whether it's the removing of different sufferings in the world, or or different ailments or different plagues or even instinct, animals we think are instinct, like I don't know, man, I didn't say it right. But anyway, so just check out one more video. It's the rest of the other inventions, right? So that's the main thing. I really get a chance to actually look at the second one. But the point is saying that the point is just saying that okay. Hold on a second. All right, so we did that one. Okay, here we go.
Years. However,
All right.
but you can't do that. That's impossible. Every now and then, it's important to look back into the past at the times when humans have accomplished seemingly impossible tasks. This is a great way to remind ourselves that with enough determination, we can achieve anything. Here is our top 10 list of what we believe to be the most inspirational human achievements of all time. Number 5. Medicine and hygiene. For many centuries, life was hard, painful, and short. In fact, the average human life expectancy was barely 40 years. However, thanks to the incredible work of doctors and scientists throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, advances in medical science have now doubled that figure. Not only has our lifespan doubled, we now live much more comfortably with the knowledge we now have regarding hygiene and dangerous bacteria. In fact, many diseases that once were considered death sentences have become easily manageable, and other highly infectious diseases such as polio, tuberculosis, and smallpox have been completely eradicated. Number 4. Flight. On December 17, 1903, Wilbur and Orville Wright, more commonly known as the Wright brothers, made the first powered, sustained human flight in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, with their first powered aircraft. The Wright brothers had invented the first successful airplane, finally achieving man's historic quest to fly. This significant event of the 20th century remains one of the greatest technological achievements of all time. For humans, flight is impossible, but we do it anyway. Number 3. The moon landing. Many people have stared up at the moon for thousands of years, assuming it was an unattainable destination. However, in 1969, American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed the Lunar Module Eagle spacecraft on the surface of the moon, and the world stood still as everyone listened intently to their radios to hear Neil Armstrong utter his famous line, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Putting a man on the moon is arguably humankind's most inspiring accomplishment. In fact, it's so unbelievable that there are many people out there who simply don't believe it. It paved the way for space travel and led to a number of spin-off inventions, including flame-resistant textiles used by firefighters, invisible braces, improved satellite dishes, and better medical imaging. It showed that human potential is not limited to this planet. Number 2, the internet. Knowledge is an incredibly powerful thing. The internet provides us with unlimited access to all of the information and knowledge humans have ever discovered. It also allows people from all over the world to communicate and share information as though you are in the same room, and it provides an incredible outlet for creative endeavors of all kinds. Number 1. The discovery and mastery of electricity. We have this at the top of our list because of one simple question. When was the last time you spent a day without the use of electricity? In this day and age, electricity and electronic devices surround us everywhere we go. Aside from less developed areas, it's almost impossible to find a place untouched by electricity. And it has enabled us to rewrite the laws of what's possible and what's not. Computers, laptops, phones, television, video games, cameras, kitchen appliances, and of course one of my personal favorites, air conditioning units, as well as thousands of other devices, wouldn't be with us today without the discovery and mastery of electricity. As always, we appreciate your feedback, so please leave a comment below.
Okay. Well, to innovation. Any thoughts? Any reflections as we move on?
Nope.
Okay. So so anyway, so yeah, so that's where we're at with this. That's where we're at. And the thing is, when we talk about taking on that responsibility of saying like, hey, you know what, I am here to, I'm part of the solution. I'm here to remove pain and suffering, from the world in my way. Like, I mean, obviously, you can't do it my way. I can't do it your way, but everyone has this, ability to do that. Everyone has this kind of like, Moshe Rabbeinu, type quality where like at their highest level, they, we can look at the different levels of dynamics. There's people of there's Israel, and then within Israel there's the Levine, right? And within that, you have the holy of the holies, right? And so we can also look at that in terms of our development, right? Where you could say in the frame of Israel, hey, we're part of the community, we do our mitzvahs, we donate our money. We're good. We're good Jews. We do our thing. We go to shul every week. We show up. We invite people over, that type of thing, right? And then you have this dynamic, which is a little bit more elevated, which is this idea of like being like, like a levy, like, being a person who's like in a position of responsibility, a person of accountability, and these types of things. And then there's a level, a little bit past that, which is the highest, which is, a person who, is in essence, responsible in connection for the cloud, for the collective, right? And so the question, so the dynamic is like in life, that's a decision, because every one of us have those three levels within us, right? We have the person who could just fit in. We have the person who's a leader, or a person who has account responsibility, and then we have a person who can take care of everybody, right? And so when we go on this dynamic of the mitzvot, right? When we talk about the mitzvot and keeping the Torah, and we talk about uniqueness and all those things, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, I want to strengthen myself so much that nothing on the outside can limit my perception of God, right? I want to learn, I want to be connected, I want to be so imbued in the mitzvahs that nothing can deter my connection to God. And by doing that, I elevate to the higher chambers within myself, right? And those higher chambers that I elevate within myself, physically are expressed, right? Physically are expressed, by the actions that I do in life. All right. So we're gonna read a little bit of Rabbi Sachs about this week's parsha in a leadership context, kind of like tap us off type of a thing. But this is the thing, we gotta, it's like believing. I think I'm talking to Otino about this. If you believe in Hashem, that means you have no doubt in your mind that you can accomplish anything. That's it. That's the beginning. That's the beginning. Like, what does it mean to believe in Hashem? Believe in Hashem means that the whole world was created for me to achieve greatness. And the struggles and the challenges and the conditions, everybody got their struggles. I know rich kids that got struggles. I know kids who, didn't have parents, who have struggles. Everybody has struggles, and it's all relative to what that individual can handle, right? Some people are stronger in certain ways. Some people are weaker. Some people are more vulnerable, some people are more sensitive. It's all different types of things. But the point is saying that this is the reality. We can accomplish anything, right? And the way to connect to such an idea is not through our own strength and will or whatever. If it was that, everyone would do it, right? You just got to be really strong. No, you need something that transcends your perception of reality. And that's what the Torah does. And not that it does it just on an intellectual level, like, oh, here's some new ideas. No, you're infused with light. Your neshama is infused with light, which actually changes the physicality. It's the soul that changes it. It's like when we talk about the idea of Michaye Hamatim. And they said you're going to be reincarnated, but when you're reincarnated, at first you're going to have your original body. But because you have this new expanded soul inside of this body, any of the ailments, any of the healing, anything that's not in the state of perfection is going to go to that. It's going to return to that. Or it's going to become that. So it's the same way. It's like the more we connect to the Torah, the more we connect to mitzvot. We're Erev Shabbos, right? Shabbat itself is a connection to it's as if you kept the entire Torah, right? It says if you keep Shabbat, it's as if you kept all the mitzvahs of the Torah, right? One of the things, same thing by CC. So when we keep Shabbat, we're literally drawing down this powerful light through every action that we do that infuses our soul, that allows us to have this expanded perception, allowing the higher chambers of myself to manifest and thus become my actions, right? And so that's what. So all right. So Rabbi Sachs, Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, in blessed memory, be with us. We'll learn your holy words, Erev Shabbos. So in Parsha Naso, he says the politics of envy. He says a few things in the Torah are more revolutionary than its concept of leadership. He says the ancient societies are heretical, and the masses were poor and prone to hunger and disease. They were usually illiterate, and they were used by rulers as a means to wealth and power, rather than people with individual rights. A concept born only in the 17th century, the times they formed a corvée, a vast constricted labor force, conscripted labor force, often used to construct monumental buildings intended to glorify the king. At others, they were dragged into the army to further the rulers' imperial design. He said rulers often had absolute power of life and death over their subjects. Not only were kings and pharaohs heads of states, they also held the highest religious ranks as children of God or demigods themselves. He said their power had nothing to do with consent of the governed. It was seen as written into the fabric of the universe, just as the sun ruled the sky and the lions ruled the animal realm. So he says, so the kings ruled their populations. So that's how they kind of started. So he said he's basically going like, this is what rulership and leadership was, right? It was like people, for whatever reasons, they had achieved some power, they had power over the masses, and it was kind of like they were this kind of like royal class, and the people that were there were employed to do things to serve their kingdom, whether it was by going to war or building infrastructure, whatever. This is what this is what it was. And he says that's how things were in nature, right? That's how they saw it. He says the Torah is sustained polic. He says polemic against is I don't know polemic in this way. Okay, sorry. He said the Torah is sustained polemic against this way of seeing things. Okay, so basically, I don't know this polemic stuff as like look it up if you want, but the point is just saying he's saying the Torah is not into anything that we just read before. He says not just kings, but all of us, regardless of color, creed, or class, are in the we're all in the image of God, of the likeness of God. And the Torah, God summons his special people, Israel, to take the first steps to what might eventually become a truly egalitarian. Oh man, see, I can't even say it. God don't want me to say that word. Society, or to be more precise, a society with dignity, kavod, does not depend on the power or wealth or on ancient or the scent of birth. Hence, the concept, which we will explore more fully in Parsha Korach, of the leadership as service. The high title according to Moses in the Torah is that Hashem Eve, the Hashem of Eved Hashem, right? A servant of Hashem. And so the highest praise is that he was very humble, more than anyone on earth. It says in Numbers. He says to lead. He says to lead is this to lead. He says to lead is to serve. Greatness is humility. As the book of Proverbs put it, a man's pride will bring him low, but a humble in spirit will retain honor. He says the Torah points us. So in essence, he's saying like the whole concept of Jewish leadership is different than this other form of rulership. So he painted a picture of very like kind of like gluttonous, barbaric, self-driven, self that saw people as dispensable. And he's saying here, he said they'll talk about it more in Parshat Korach, but he's saying over here we understand Jewish leadership is from the same of service, right? And it's this is the frame of that. And the architect of Jewish leadership is Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu was given the task not to lead or rule over them, but rather to rescue them, to take them out of a bad place, to give them confidence that there was a better way, a different life. He said the Torah points us in the direction of an ideal world, but it is not assumed that we have reached it yet or within striking distance. These are the people Moses led, like many of us today, are still prone to ambitions, aspirations, vanities, and self-esteems. That they still had the human desire of honor, status, and respect. And Moses had to recognize that fact. It would be a major source of conflict in the months and the years ahead. It is one of the primary themes of the book of Numbers. Of whom were the Israelites jealous? Most of them did not aspire to be Moses. He was, after all, the man who spoke to God and to whom God spoke. He performed miracles. He brought plagues against Egypt. He divided the Red Sea. He gave the people water from the rock. And man from the heavens. Few would have had the hubris to believe that they could do any of these things. He says, but, so that's a really interesting thing when you think about the concept of Moshe and leadership, right? Because it's interesting because it's like, you know, if the Torah brought Moses as, like I asked a question the other day, you know, about the Tanya, right? So, you know, I was asking some of my friends, I say, why does the Rebbe, or why did the Alter Rebbe, right? Rabbi Zalman, why did he spend so much time at the beginning of the Sefer talking about the Benoni, right? You know, like the Benoni, which is like you have a Tzaddik and you have a Benoni and you have a Rasha, right? So the Tzaddik is the person who does it, or you can say a Chassid, right? We learned this in the Ram Klal. You can say a Chassid is the highest level, right? Which is a person who goes the extra mile, who's just completely immersed with Hashem, right? That's a chassid, right? And then you have a tzaddik, which is a person who's righteous, who does all the right things, but he's still more engaged with the world. He's like kind of like a very like a high level modern Orthodox type of person. You know, he's still kind of like involved in the world. And then you have a person who's like a Benoni, right? A Benoni is a person who makes mistakes and they do this, they go back and forth, but they do their best, right? And then you have the lowest level, which is a person who's like a Rasha, a person who doesn't care about God, Torah, nothing, he just doesn't care, he just lives the way he wants. So the thing is, I was asked the question, why dedicate the whole beginning of the Sefer to that? And his response was, because most of the world is Benoni, right? Most of the Klal Israel is Benoni. So he wanted to write a Sefer specifically for people that are dealing with that struggle. And so I think when you learn it from that perspective, you can see a certain profoundness in the words of the Tanya, because it's like, wow, like what a thinking to be so say, I'm gonna write a sefer for this particular level of soul, right? It's a big concept. It's a very, very big concept. And you can say the same thing when you think about Breslov, you think about Rabbi Nachman and Likutei Moharan. They were writing for levels of the soul, right? Like Rabbi Nachman says, specifically, I'm writing for people who are broken by life, who've been shattered by disappointments. Like he talks about these things. Like this is who this is written for, like this type of condition of the soul, right? So anyway, so the point is over here, it's an interesting idea when we learn about Moshe Rabbeinu, and we don't just learn about Moshe Rabbeinu in terms of the greatness that the things that he did, but rather the people that he was servicing, right? And how he was at this very, very high level. He was at this very, like he was talking to God. He was talking to God, and he was able to understand the plight and the challenge of the person at the lowest level spiritually. I really think that should be reflected upon, right? That he was so connected to their condition that even when they rejected him, it didn't affect him in a way of like, I'm a bad person. You know what I'm saying? It's like you have a baby. You know what I mean? You have a baby starts crying. You're like, oh, yeah, it's a baby's nature. I mean, you're gonna get upset about it? It's a baby, right? So at a point, it's your nature, to see. Anyways, so he says, but they did not have a reason to resent the fact that the religious leadership seemed to confine to, one tribe, the Levites. He says, in one family within the tribe, in that tribe, the priest or the Kohanim, male descendants of Aaron. Now that it was a tabernacle, it says, now that the tabernacle was to be consecrated, the people were about to begin the second half of their journey from Mount Sinai to the promised land. That's where we're at right now. Right? You see how it weaves perfectly together? Now we're on this process of leaving Mount Sinai and going into the promised land. But the promised land is the potential, is the person that we have to go and meet. The person that's inside of us, this person that we don't even know exists. We have to go on this journey to meet that person. We think we're meeting, the Wizard of Oz. No, we're going to meet the highest potential of this person that we can become. He said that is a constant. He says that is a constant. He says that is a constant throughout history. He says, Achilles, I know I didn't say it right. He says, it is in the character of a few men to honor without envy a friend who is prosperous. These are like Greek people. He says, Galof warned that hatred is activated and envy passive dislikes. But he said there is but one step away from envy to hate. He says Jews should know this in their very bones, that we've often been invalid. Sorry, he says we've been envied. He says we have been envied, and all the too frequently that envy has turned to hate with tragic consequences. Leaders need to be aware of the pearls of envy, especially within the people they lead. This is one of the unifying themes of the long and apparently disconnected Parsha of Naso. In it, we see Moshe confronting three potential sources of envy. The first laid within the tribe of Levi. Its members had reason to resent the fact that the priesthood had gone to one man and his descendants, Aaron's brothers. He says the second had to do with the individuals who were neither of the tribe of Levi or Aaron, who felt that they had the right to be holy in the sense of having a special, intense relationship with God in the way that the priests had. We're just talking about those different levels, right? And so the third had to do with the leaderships of the other tribes who have felt that they were left out of the service of the tabernacle. We see Moses dealing sequentially with all of these potential dangers. First, Moses gives the Levitical clan, the Levies, the clan, a special role of carrying the vessels, furnishing, in the framework of the tabernacle, whenever the people journeyed from place to place. Most of the scarce objects that were carried in the clan of Kehat. He says the Goshenites were to carry the clothes, the coverings, the drapes. The Mirianites were to carry the planks, the bars, the poles, the sockets that made up the tabernacle's framework. Each clan, in other words, had a special role in a place in the solemn possession as the house of God was carried through the desert. He says, next, Moses deals with individuals who aspire to higher levels of holiness. This, it seems, is the underlying logic of the Nazarite, the individuals who vow to set themselves apart for the Lord. He is not to drink or any other great product. He was not to have this haircut, and he was not to defy himself through contact with the dead. Becoming a Nazarite was, it seems, a temporary and assuming the kind of a set apart associated with priesthood and voluntary large degree of holiness. Lastly, he turns to the leadership of the tribe. So he's showing like Moshe's leadership in this idea of understanding where everyone's at, understanding all these different desires, having all these different groups, all these different people competing, people having envy, people having jealousy. And his job is not to get caught up with, oh, this person's hating on me or they don't believe that I'm there, but rather because of your position to administer the needs, right? Like, like I said, when Noah was in the ark, like he was feeding the animals, and some of the animals bit him. He was a little bit late on the food, so they bit him, right? Imagine that. I'm taking care of the animals and you bite me. That's crazy. Right. But that's what it was. But it's like we're learning like very high level leadership. This is from God. This is very high level leadership uh, um, connection and delegation of power and creating unity and dismantling inner fighting and all these things. Lastly, he turns to the leadership of the tribes, the highly respective chapter 7 of this parsha is immense of the offering of the tribes on the association of the dictations of the altar, the dedication of the altar. Sorry. He says their offerings were identical. He says, and the Torah could have abbreviated its account by describing the gifts describing the gifts brought by one tribe and stating that each of the other tribes did likewise. Yet the sheer repetition has the effect of emphasizing the fact that each tribe had an enormous its moment of glory. So he's going through this whole parsha and showing how Moshe was basically delegating. He's taking this aspect of the parsha and showing the genius of Moshe's delegation on a material level, on a spiritual level, and even now on a tribal level. And so he's showing like through these different components of dedication, he was able to show the tribes and keep everyone in a connected, equal thing, basically accepting their limitations and elevating them above that. This is amazing. So he says each by giving the house of God acquired its own share of honor. He says these episodes are not whole of not so, but enough of it to signal something that every leader in every group needs to take serious. Even when people take in principle the equal dignity of all, and even when they see leadership as service, the whole dysfunctional process dies. The whole dysfunctional possessions die hard. The dysfunctional possessions die hard. People still resent the success of others. They still feel that honor has gone to another when it should have gone to them. He says. He says. Rav Eliezer Hakapor says, envy, lust, and the pursuit of honor drives a person out of this world. He says the fact that these are destructive emotions does not stop some people, perhaps most of us, some feeling them time to time, and nothing does, and nothing does more than put at risk the harmony of a group. This is one reason why a leader must be humble, or he or she must feel none of these things, but a leader must be aware that not everyone is humble. And Moshe has a Korach. He says Moshe has a Korach. Every Julius Caesar, I don't know, Cyrus, and every Duncan, Macbeth, every Othello. I don't know Othello. I don't know these people. And he says in many groups, it says in many groups there is a potential troublemaker driven by a sense of injury to his self-esteem. Driven by a sense of injured self-esteem or injury to his self-esteem, these are often the leader's deadliest enemies, and they can do great damage to the group. There's no way of eliminating the danger entirely, but Moshe in Parsha Naso tells us how to behave. Well, this is like massive stuff we're getting. And he says, honor everyone equally, pay special attention to potential defective groups. Make each feel valuable. Well, he says, make each feel valuable, give everyone a moment in the limelight, and only if a ceremonial way. He says, set a person's example of humility, make it clear to all that leadership is a service, a form of is not a form of status. Find in ways which most of those with a particular passion can express it, and ensure that everyone has a chance to contribute. There is no fail-safe way to avoid politics of envy, but there are ways of minimizing it. And the parsha is an object lesson on how to do so. Okay, that's powerful. That's big. That's big because it's big, and I think Otio may have some words if he can speak. I don't know if he can speak, but because we this has been a real big focus this week in Mishalat Yisharim on this idea of humility, the system of humility, and it just shows us how everything's coming together. This is part of that unraveling of who we are is through humility, is through the rearranging of anything that comes in our brain. That's why our conversation last night had a lot to do with like really challenging this like Western system of competition and and dominance and superiority and status and these things. And obviously these things have aspects that could be very positive. But we're seeing how does that affect my understanding of God's creation? Right? How does that understand my understanding myself? And so that's what we were investigating, in this whole thing. And I think that's, where we're going now is just, part of that unraveling of who we are is connecting to a greater sense of humility, right? We just left Mount Sinai, right? Now we're coming down. Now we're dealing with issues of the Egel and all other types of stuff, right? So that energy is going on now, right? And soon we're going to get to the 17th of Tammuz, which is the beginning of the fixing of this time period, right? Because right now we just received this tremendous amount of light. Now our ancestors, they built a golden calf around this time, right? So that means that supernatural connection to light comes with a lot that we weren't necessarily fully prepared to handle, right? And maybe we were, but we had to go through this process to understand what it was to handle this light. So we had this whole process of the ego, right? And so now it's that kind of like that confusion is starting after this tremendous connection, right? Now that we're responsible for humanity, now that we have clarity of who we were and who we are and where we're going, now we have this big responsibility, this whole thing. So, it's the humility and focus and learning about humility, reading much literature about humility. But the Ramchal says specifically, the humility has to start in the mind. Your mind has to be humble. Your mind has to see things totally connected. And your mind has to see the connection levels of God's structure, right? Human, animal, plant, rock, different levels of energy, different levels of the soul, all these things. But anything outside of that structure of hierarchical structure of basically distribution of God's light, everything has to be thrown out. And that's why I started the conversation with this idea of like, well, what if like this whole social construct never existed for us? Like the limitations of our parents and grandparents and cousins and nephews and community members and teachers and priests and imams and rabbis and all these different people that we had in our life. What if their limitations never affected us? What will we be capable of? Anybody want to jump in, please?
Well, Baruch Hashem, I think that this is a really good subject to think about because I was doing some meditating this week and just thinking back to just different like stages of my life, and just in those stages, what uh, the people that I was around, friends, really, you know, kind of gave me, helped me to have a framework about that time of life. And so, with that, I believe that we're always receiving uh, others, projections, whether they're good or bad, but they also become that place of limitations. Um, but I also think about, hey, what if this part of my life I didn't run into this particular person, or this I got into this situation, you know, how different would I be, or what would I have done, or what could I have accomplished? And so I think about it. This is good. Okay.
I was just thinking about Moses and how, from the standpoint of his, his leadership, he had a lot that that he himself had to just, I'm sure, deal with. I mean, you responsible, or you at least, it seems like he's responsible for all of these people. And in the midst of being responsible for all of these people, he he is so humble, and he's wanting the very best for them. He's wanting the best. He's wanting, their connection to Hashem to be uh strong, to be very firm. And in the midst of all of that, he realizes that, what, the best way to be able to actually help the people to not be limited by maybe whatever they've experienced in their past, and so forth, or whatever teachings they may have come in contact with, um, whatever their train of thought was prior to encountering him and moving forward from Mount Sinai, is like, okay, I've got to give you a level of responsibility on this journey, so that you can understand the weight of what it means to deal with whatever it is that you're assigned to do, whether it's to carry this portion of the tent, or whatever it is. That you're responsible for this. And so oftentimes, you'll see a serious breakdown because one feels like they're walking in humility, and then another feels like they're walking in humility. And at the end of the day, Hashem is looking like, no, you're not walking in humility, because you're not doing what I instructed you to do. But with Moses, he was walking in humility, and it was a form of humility that was literally undeniable, to have all, like you said, have the Korah and all, coming, all the people coming against him and speaking evil words and so forth. But yet still, he still had Hashem at the forefront. He didn't allow things that was going on, that he saw, to deter him from finishing what he started with the children of Israel. And so I just thought that was my reflections.
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Otina, are you there, or are you caught up? All right. So yeah, so I think so. Yeah, I think that's the key thing, and I would say, that aspect of asking Hashem to be more sensitive, and asking Hashem to want to be able to connect, to that aspect of what's going on and being able to separate yourself, right? Not to really cleanse yourself of any agenda other than wanting to serve Hashem, and like and meditating on this, right? And meditating on the fact that like I want, Hashem, I want more. Please provide the whole world, for us all to be more sensitive, for us to, be able to trust our vulnerability. I was thinking about it. I talked about it actually with Otino today or yesterday, but we were learning the Ram Call, and one of the things that came out of it was, everyone has a trigger, and sometimes for me, I've noticed for myself that like one of the things for me, like when I feel like I'm in a vulnerable situation or someone's not respecting me or, maybe even in some form of danger, I could respond with ego, right? And like, who are you to say this? Or do you know, like, this type of a thing. And this, came from just growing up, being a kid and like, going to, when I was much younger, kind of like being bullied a little bit, being very sensitive, trying to figure things out. And you kind of develop this kind of like persona, I did at least, of like playing sports and being one of those like tough guys, but it was really kind of like a way to kind of like, like as a way to kind of like fit in and be, kind of like protective and that type of a thing. So the point is just saying, I kind of grew out of that, obviously, but I still see at times when I'm in those compromising situations that I have this inclination to respond that way. Not saying that I do, but there has been times that I have. And when I have done that, people with me, they're like, wait, where did that come from? Like, you're like this nice guy, this amazing, and then all of a sudden now you're responding this way, right? And so, which is it real? Or you're not a real person? You know what I mean? This type of a thing, right? But no, that's that in that moment, that's a fight or flight moment for me, right? And so like that's just something I've been thinking about since like the last week, going into Shavuot is that part of that and learning Ram Call was like the really, just it really just kind of like just brought everything together, yesterday, which is like, when we are in that moment that we have to realize that that moment of vulnerability, that moment of our normal reactivity, that is the moment we were created for. Those moments when we have the ability to say, hey, I'm going to take from the tree of life, or I'm going to eat from the tree of knowledge, right? Because if I react in a way that makes me feel safe, which is like that response, that's my lower self, right? My higher self is to say like, hey, I feel vulnerable in this moment. I feel scared. I don't feel respected, but I'm going to cling to Hashem. I'm going to say, Hashem, please, you protect me from this moment. You pull me through this situation, right? And thus, I completed that opportunity in that moment, right? So our greatest moment is that part of ourselves when we feel vulnerable, we feel scared, we feel this, and we have this instinctual reaction, right? And it's not pretty, right? It's not our better self. It's never our better self, right? And so it could come out in anger, it could come out in isolation, it could come out in passive aggressiveness, whatever. It could come out with a sharp tongue. But even when a person gets angry, why are they angry? Because they feel they have no other option. They feel like they're completely in a vulnerable situation, and this is the only way to maintain power, right? Why do you believe that? Why do you believe that? Because that's the way we were designed. Everyone we saw operated the same way. When mom and dad got angry, when cousins, brothers, when they got angry, they yelled, or they got upset, or they felt challenged. But what was going on? They were in a place of Egypt, right? And a limitation and a constriction, right? And they had a narrow reality. So at that moment, that's all they felt they can do. You have to show force. You have to show power. You have to show these different things. You have to do that. But instead, what we're saying here is that's the moment. That's the moment. God forbid we have to deal with that moment. But I'm saying but that's the moment of my greatness. Is being able to say, at this moment, I am enough of a human being. I'm enough of a ben Adam, about Adam. I'm at that level that I can be able to say, as a human being, that I am not controlled by impulses. I am made in the image of God. So I am not controlled by impulses. So now that I had this experience, this impact, and of course I'm saying this, I'm gonna be challenged with it like tonight or something. You know what I mean? God forbid, please, I don't need any more challenges. I'm just trying to improve the world, right? And so the idea is just to say that, you know, when we go forward, is just to have in mind, it's like, okay, well, you know what? This is my normal trigger. You know, people even say it. You know how I am. You know what I mean? Okay, you know I was going to react that way. You know that's what I was going to do. But it's like that's animalistic. That's animalistic, right? That's animalistic. Okay. So, any last parting words? Anything? You know, we good? Where we at? You know, mic drop.
Yeah, you say Mike drop. Uh, you know it's awesome because Baruch Hashem. I was listening to Rob Berg, may his memory be blessed,
Amen.
yesterday, and he was teaching about Yosef, and he was talking about how Yosef was in the I think he said he was in the sold, and how his world around him became very chaotic, right? And that he was developed through that chaos, in that he 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 didn't respond to the chaos in the normal and the usual way. What he did was he always took the high road. He always took the high road to respond in the higher way, you know, and that allowed his gift to manifest and to be seen by the world, to be seen by creation, uh, at that moment. You know, when you think about when you think about like his situation with Potiphar's wife, you know, and you think about the jail, and as he was teaching this class, I was thinking to myself, like, wow, you know, Joseph had to have been at a place whereas he began to think, man, you know, like he could have thought, man, you know, there's no way I'm out of this. You know, man, I'm in prison, man, I'm in jail for a crime I didn't commit, man, I'm never getting out of it. But he never thought that. He just took that and made it an opportunity to elevate his situation. And so Toda.
So that's an important point too, is, you know, like the idea of like rising above the occasion, right? And great leaders have this theme of rising above the occasion. And then you say that, you're like, you got to rise above the occasion. The mechanism of that, the mechanism of that is to understand that there is a point of reactivity, right? And there's a point of reactivity that triggers us, in various different ways, right? It could come from childhood experiences, it could come from genetic, who knows, past life, all types of things, right? So we have a list of triggers, and those triggers make us angry. Those things, you know, get us flare our tempers and makes us reactive or whatever, you know, acting in our lower side, right? And so this idea of being able to hone in on that part of ourselves and then be able to say like, hey, you know what? At that moment, I react that way out of comfort, out of safety, but it's not giving me the results that I want. And more than that, God created this scenario as a hyper experience of growth, right? To be able to grow in a hyper sense, right? So this is my moment of hyper growth. But if I go the old way of comfort and reacting in that way, then from that dynamic, right? I missed the opportunity. All right, so Shabbat Shalom. We should continue on. We should have a blessed Shabbat, only good news, you know, powerhouse Shabbat, and just continue to elevate. Baruch atah